At first, when I heard of this musical biopic about the life of Robbie Williams, with himself being played by a CGI monkey, I think it's fair to say I was pretty uninterested. Then more trailers were released, more footage was released, my interest spiked and spiked until it became, when am I going to see this, rather than if. And obviously, I was a bit late on that train, sorry, came out on Boxing Day, it's now January the 12th, so I'm a bit late. But I think it was the monkey aspect that made me uninterested in general. I am certain that Robbie Williams' story is very, very intriguing. If you've watched any interviews of him, if you know who he is, you know that he's very good at telling stories. He's very entertaining. He's a born entertainer. So that wasn't the issue here. But I saw more footage, began to understand why him being a CGI monkey isn't as daft as we all thought, and then went for it. I'm just so shocked that when the first reviews came out from the US, no one knew who he was. Now I get it right. I'm English. He's an icon over here. But seriously, out of all the reviews I watched, no one had heard of him, which is really surprising for me. Hadn't heard of Gary Barlow, hadn't heard of Take That. If anyone doesn't know by now, they were the UK's version of NSYNC, of Backstreet Boys. Now, right, I get it. Take That was a few years earlier, like a couple years before NSYNC and the Backstreet Boys. And yes, this is also being spoken by someone who wasn't alive for neither of Take That, Backstreet Boys, or NSYNC's initial success. But that just puts it in perspective, right? That is what they were like over here. One Direction, which everyone knows, in the early days really looked at Take That for inspiration. Well, not with the dancing, but for a lot of things. Take That truly were one of the biggest boy bands, groups in British history, and Robbie Williams plays a huge part in it, which is why I think this story is a really interesting one to tell. Better Man felt like a little breath of fresh air for the musical biopics. Now, don't get me wrong, it follows the same story as all the others. In a certain way. The artist achieves fame, it gets very overwhelming due to how poor the industry is and how badly they're treated. They use drugs and alcohol to hide the pain. Everything goes wrong very quickly within their personal lives. There's a lot to fix, and they do. So what was different? I was thinking whilst I was watching this in my screening, this felt a lot like Rocket Man in 2019, which I really, really like, which covered the life of Elton John. There's a lot more emotion, a lot more depth to the story. Even though you may think you know certain parts of Robbie and Elton's story respectively, every emotional scene just hits so much deeper than other movies, like other biopics that we've had. You can truly see and feel the pain that they suffered. More importantly as well, where they learn from what they've experienced and make right, and you care. Like, you really care about them. A huge problem I keep on getting with all these endless musical biopics from the past 10 years is that the songs just don't progress the story at all. I have this issue with genuine musicals anyway. When you're telling the life of a great in the music industry and you're using their songs, to me, it's a given. It has to progress the story. In Back to Black from last year in 2024, which I absolutely hated, it felt like to distract you from the absolute mess that you're watching, or his Valerie, and then you're watching more mess and you're getting lost. And studio notices, they go, "Oh, we're losing you. Boom, here's Rehab, here's Tears Dry on Their Own." Better Man could have easily done this, and I'm so glad that they didn't. Angels is used to show the pain of losing a loved one. She's the one showing the joy and kind of freedom of meeting someone. Phil, after his father abandons him and is only left with little, Let Me Entertain You, where he confronts his past selves as a battle against his self-doubt. This scene was great, by the way, something definitely out of a Planet of the Apes film. But yeah, throughout the film, whenever he performs, he sees versions of himself, well, past versions of himself in the crowd, constantly telling him that he doesn't belong, that he isn't good enough. This confrontation is where he fights every version, basically. And he's at Nebworth, which is the gig that he's wanted his whole life. And he kills every single one, which symbolises how he's no longer going to take these thoughts. That he just wants to be himself. And I thought that was lovely, quite frankly. Lovely. The final scene was really quite emotional. And I was saying this is quite an emotional biopic anyway. At the beginning of the film, Robbie and his dad perform My Way, the Frank Sinatra song. And at the end, after the whole film has happened, after everything that's happened in his life, he invites his dad on stage at the Royal Albert Hall to sing My Way. to like reconcile with his father. He sees his past selves again in the crowd. At first they're their usual, telling him that he's not enough and stuff like that. But as the song plays out, they transition into much calmer, much more understanding, and quite frankly, much happier versions of himself, symbolizing how he's finally happy with himself on stage. He is so happy about how much he's grown over the years, not just as a performer, but as a person. And that was a really, really nice message. And that pretty much got my whole screening crying, to be honest. It was also really nice to relate to a biopic, which for me doesn't happen too often. It sounds a little crazy. I know I'm not a megastar who has millions of people staring at you, judging you like Robbie Williams has. But the imposter syndrome and self-doubt is something I've dealt with. And that was a really emotional part for me, that an absolute icon and pop star deals with these things all the time. You think he's happy on stage, but really he's suffering. You think he's having the time of his life doing what he's always wanted to do, but really he's struggling and battling something painful. And that was the most emotional part for me, I would say. A final little comment on the monkey CGI stuff, because I think that that's the biggest talking point coming out of Better Man. Like I said in the intro, I was a little confused, a little uninterested on why they went with this. But now I've seen the film, and to be fair, in an interview, Robbie Williams said this himself. I truly understand it. And he said, if you watch it, you'll get why we made this decision. This film is about how Robbie sees himself and sees his mental health, hence the constant visions of his past selves at his gigs. If it was John O'Davis, who was great, by the way, on screen playing Robbie, then that's how we see Robbie. But going back to one of my past points, this film is about how he sees himself, not how we see him. And that's why they went with the decision. I think it's a great one. And it's a very, very unique take as well. Like, we're all going to remember this as the biopic about Robbie Williams with the CGI monkey. And like, come on. It's a really good choice. Great choice from Robbie and Michael Gracey. A real quick one. Now that the Academy Awards shortlists are out for 2025, we now have a better idea of what's going to get nominated where. But importantly, what films the Academy like. For example, for some reason, they love Emilia Perez. I don't know. Anyway, I thought Better Man would get in for original song for Forbidden Road. Turns out he isn't eligible, wasn't on the shortlist. So Better Man can really only walk away with one nomination here for visual effects, which did make the shortlist for, so it was in the top 10. I think it has a real shot at the nomination here. It's currently in my top 5. I think quite a few people are predicting it in top 5. I think it's one of those where it's on the line. There's a chance it might not get in. I would put it in, but obviously I'm not an Academy voter, so we'll see how that goes. As someone who's proud enough to say that they're a big fan of The Greatest Showman, I never doubted Michael Gracey. He was great once again. I kind of feel like he did more with Better Man, however. As often with The Greatest Showman, I do watch because I really like the music. There has been there's been times where I've watched this film and just skipped all of the chit chat, as we call it here in my house. We skip the chit chat, go to the musical numbers, skip more chit chat, go to the musical numbers. That's not going to happen with Better Man at all. So could Better Man be better than The Greatest Showman for me? I don't know. But yeah, that's a great positive, by the way, for Better Man. I really like Better Man. I think it helps. I knew Robbie Williams. I knew Take That. I knew their music. But I was really, really entertained. And to be fair to him, in the beginning, he said I would be. And I didn't doubt that either. Like I said in my intro, he's a very, very entertaining performer. He's a very, very entertaining person. So I never doubted that I wouldn't be entertained in a way. But I felt the emotion, the pain, the joy, learned a lot more about his life and how he feels as he was performing, and how his mental health really, really took a toll. I for sure would recommend Better Man, and I thought it was great, which is why I'll give it 4 stars. Sorry I've been away for a little bit. I've had a few things to deal with, but it's all good now. And there's so much more stuff I've got planned that's in the works. I'm writing scripts for stuff right now. If you enjoyed the review, please like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.